Hey, Dale, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. So tell us who you are and what you do.
So my name is Dale Bertrand. I run Fire and Spark. We do SEO strategy up here in Boston. We're 25 people, and I have a technical background, but I've really been able to leverage that into building the agency and the team.
How'd you get started to create an agency?
Oh, that goes back a long time ago. So, 2008 is around the time frame. And I was working as a software developer. I hated my job. I hated my life. So I was thinking about what can I do next? And really where I ended up was what did I want to learn next? And I wanted to move away from software and towards learning more about digital marketing because that's what I was excited about. And I was building websites and selling products as an affiliate in my spare time back in the early 2000s when I was working as a software developer. And then I eventually decided that I wanted to try to do some consulting in that area. And it was just because I was excited about learning more about digital marketing. And that's really how it all got started.
Awesome. I love it. Well, let's talk about, as of right now, you're in the multiple seven figures and a majority of your business comes from speaking at events.
And yeah, that is surprising to me, honestly, that it's true and to hear you say it, because going into this year, it wasn't true. Like in 2023, we got most of our clients from webinars that we did or really from partners. But what ended up happening was like, I love speaking at conferences. I do 30 conferences a year. So that's a lot. Like I'm on the road most of the time, weekdays. I have a rule where I'm never traveling on like a Saturday or a Sunday. But I love it, right? And really what happened was I've been doing it ever since things opened up after the pandemic. So around 2021, forward to 2024. And really what happened was that speaking at so many conferences for over the course of a few years, it really built up where all of a sudden I started getting leads from gigs that I did 2-3 years ago. And, fast forward to 2024, most of our business is coming from these speaking gigs, but it took a while.
Yeah. So for people listening right now, every once in a while, I think people be asked to speak in front of like a chamber of commerce or like a smaller event. And I always believe you kind of have to start off small to get, bigger and on bigger stages. But when everything started opening up from COVID, and you were like, hey, I want to speak on a stage. How did you get your first gig?
Well, for me, before COVID, it's really important. Before COVID, I had been invited to speak at some of those small events. They were like digital marketing. There's like an SEO meetup in Boston. Yeah. And I did those events and I loved it. And really what I remember is that they gave me 15 minutes to talk and I took like 30 minutes. And obviously the host is not happy with me because I'm messing up the event. But that's when it just dawned on me that I really enjoyed doing it. Then obviously the pandemic hit, but when things started to open up after the pandemic, there were a lot of conferences that were looking for speakers because the speakers had dropped out or the audiences were too small for them. And that was really my opportunity. So I took advantage of that. I said yes to everything for a couple of years. And that's how I got up to 30 last year, probably hit 30 by the end of this year. And the more I do it, the more I enjoy it. So I'm just rolling with it.
A lot of people are fearful for what they're going to talk about on stage. And I used to, when I ran an agency, and it was, I think we're around the similar age. When you were in the technology sector, they thought you knew everything about everything in technology. So you'd always get asked to speak on weird topics that I would never even know anything about. And then I'd have to research because I was like, oh, I'm going to get on stage. And then I had such fear of messing up because I was speaking on something I just learned.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
And I did horrible versus when they asked me to speak on something I really knew, I was like, yeah, easy enough. They'd be like, where's your slides? Don't need them. Just put me up on stage.
Yeah, I mean, where I started, and I think this is probably the right place for a lot of people to start, is really talking about a case study, something that you worked on. because you know really well what you did, what the results were, why you think it worked. And audiences love those kind of talks because they're looking for you to kind of pull back the curtain and unveil. It's kind of like the secrets of the trade, but nobody knows, very few people know what you do. Super well. And the folks in the audience who've never done it before, they'd be really curious. Oh, how do you do branding or PR or SEO or Google ads or whatever it is that you do? And when you're talking about a case study, that's what makes it real. And that's what makes it so that you can have some passion behind it rather than just a dry educational speech. So I think that's really the place to start.
Yeah. And I even kind of like to take it a step further and tell the stories around the case study, almost kind of call it like a case story of going like, here's how this person, like, let me tell you the story about X, Y, and Z that achieved this of what you guys want. Do you guys want to know how to do this? And then you kind of go through it and they're like, oh, this is awesome. Like it just gives them little bits and nuggets to go through. What are you doing? Because there's a lot of times people get up on stage. There's two types of people. There's the takers that get up on the stage and you can tell they're the takers. And there's some huge pitch where, they're holding back a lot and you have to kind of pay them to get something. And then there's the ones that are the huge givers that gives everything. And I guess there's a third one. There's the givers that don't ever have the next step. Which do you think, like, where did you start? Where are you at now where you're starting to generate a lot of these leads?
Well, I really firmly believe that you have to be a giver. I tell more than I feel comfortable telling because that's how I know that I'm doing it right. And honestly, I don't feel like I hold anything back. I mean, a lot of times, I'm talking about SEO a lot of the times because we're an SEO agency and we have a methodology that we call SEO for revenue, which is really conversion focused SEO. So basically, when you're focused on conversion rather than just rankings and traffic, your SEO strategies are different. So a lot of the talks that I'm doing are related to that methodology. So I can explain part of that methodology. I can show them examples and some case studies on how it worked, and then walk them through the framework on exactly how they can do it at home. And then what happens, right? Half the people try to do it, or maybe they successfully do it on their own. The other half of the people are like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I don't have time to do that. Can you do it for me? So I'm a firm believer that you pretty much tell everything. Hey, here's how to do it. I'll even walk you through it. Let's hop on a call. I'll explain to you how complicated it is. And, you let it dawn on them that they might want somebody to help them with it.
Yeah, I think that's the key is when you can, and it's no matter what prospect or what client you're talking to, if they understand your framework and they understand that methodology that you have, then they're going to have more confidence that you can actually deliver it to them and for them. Like you can get them the results because everybody wants to know how it works, but they don't want to make it.
Yeah. And those sales calls are not somebody calling you saying, hey, Dale, never heard of you before. Convince me that I should work with your agency rather than the 20 other SEO agencies that landed in my inbox like this morning, right? Because people come to us, they've seen one of my videos, they've attended one of my talks. So when I pick up the phone, they say, Dale, that strategy really does make sense. Do you think it would work for my website? That's a very different conversation.
Yeah. What do you have any call to actions at the end of your speech or in your speech in order to, capture the people that you're speaking to?
Yeah. And it depends on the talk because every conference is different. And we also have hosted webinars that we do, which is quite different. But when I'm in front of an audience, usually I'm not getting a list of the attendees or something like that. So really what I usually do is I'll have a slide in the middle of my presentation that has a QR code where people can download the slides. So I end up getting a bunch of contact information just from people in the middle of the presentation because they want to download the slides. Then at the end of the presentation, I'll have a call to action. And that call to action depends on the topic, the audience, all of that. So it might be a piece of content to download. I have an AI presentation where they're downloading 20 of my prompts that are relative to the presentation. And then if it's the type, like imagine if it's a webinar where I already have everybody's contact information because it's one of our hosted webinars that our agency is running. Then the goal for those presentations is to get people to raise their hand to have a sales conversation. And I'll offer them a strategy session with me or one of the strategists on my team, but that's a different call to action because it's really a different context for the presentation.
Yeah. What are you doing ahead of time before you get to the conference and speaking? Because a lot of people just show up and they think that's all they need to do. Are you and your team doing any kind of research or planning, or what are you guys doing?
Actually, a lot. I was on an hour-long call this morning where we were mapping out our playbook. So we have a spreadsheet that we call the event playbook. And what that is like 30 things that we usually do depending on the event. And it's things like researching the speakers and reaching out to all the speakers, and then also researching speakers to understand who we might want to talk to because they might make a good partner for the agency, and then figuring out who's going to be there because there might be some former clients that are attending inbound this year that we would want to make sure they attend one of my sessions or we can meet up with. The other thing we do, or I like to do because it's fun, is host a dinner at these events and then invite everybody I know in the city or the other speakers or, that sort of thing. When I was on the phone with one of my assistants today, she was talking about, she has a list of 200 people she's inviting to the dinner that we're hosting at Inbound this year. And I said, 200 is a little too much for that particular dinner, but we'll figure out how to whittle that down. But there's really a lot there. And for folks listening to this, I'm happy to share our playbook. It's not a secret. It's not rocket science. Really, the value comes from turning the crank on the playbook and executing. I have 3 people on my team that help me to execute. They're either doing the research or reaching out to people or following up with everybody afterwards. I mean, when we get contact information, we try to reach out to people via LinkedIn and email and phone call when they attend one of my sessions. And then, ask them, hey, what are you thinking around SEO? Is this something that you're doing? Are you interested in talking to Dale? That sort of thing. And it works, but it's a machine where you just have to constantly be turning the crank.
Are you paying to speak at any of these, or are these all, or like, did you pay to speak in the very beginning, or?
No, I've never paid to speak. And I'm not against it at all. Like if I think I'm going to get ROI, I'd be happy to pay to speak. That's a good investment. I just haven't really gotten there yet because I've got so many events. I would say half of the time, and this was not true in the beginning, but in 2024, half of the time I'm getting paid to speak. And then the other half of the time, I'm not paying to speak, but I am paying for my airfare and my hotel. Yeah. So for me, because I have the agency, I'm happy to speak at 30 conferences if it nets out to 0, because then overall I'm not paying to speak and I'm getting clients out of it. So I'm happy to do that. I'd love to be in a position where it nets out to positive. And then what's important is when I started, it didn't net out to 0. It was costing me money, but it was worth it. I mean, we got clients out of it.
Yeah, I mean, in the very beginning, I have a lot of mastermind members that they're like, "Well, I'm going to pay for a booth." I'm like, "No, like you're going to be just stuck at this booth where no one wants to walk by those people in the booth. Like they're trying to avoid you like the plague." I was like, put your money, like if they haven't invited you to speak yet, especially if this is your first one, pay to speak, then have someone film it or have the event like that be part of your deal for them to film you. So then you can use that to kind of leverage and get other speaking gigs. Because it's amazing. Once you get one speaking gig, then people see you there, they'll see the content that you promoted, and then it just starts steamrolling. And if you start really promoting their event as you're speaking, like the conference is gonna be like, man, this person's pumping the hell out of us. Like, this is awesome. Let's invite this person back.
Yeah, that's exactly the way it's worked out for me. I think one of the things I was surprised about was we had the CMO of a Fortune 500 company call me on the phone and just and say, Dale, our SEO isn't working anymore, and things are changing. We don't really understand how it's changing, but I know you have the credibility in the space to really speak to it and help us understand. And I said, oh, I have the credibility. Awesome. That sounds really good. So I was excited about that. And I said, okay, yeah. And so what I wanted to ask him was, why do you think I have the credibility? But I figured out a way to ask him that. And basically what he said was, Dale, I see that you speak at a number of conferences I've heard of. And also, I saw some videos online of you on stage. Like, it doesn't even matter what you said on stage. It's like somebody put you on stage. So you must be an expert in the space. And that's where it really started to click for me that the strategy was working.
Yeah. It's just tough though. Like, especially if you're like me, that you just don't like to travel. You got to be a little bit more. I'm very, very selective at the places that I speak at now, just because of, I'm like, I just don't want to go to that place.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to recruit other folks in your agency that can do the same thing. I mean, I'm doing a lot because I love it. I'm pushing some folks internally in my agency who are also interested, and I'll give them 5 minutes of one of my presentations at a meetup or something. Or if I get a request to do a podcast or a small event, I'll send them instead of me. I mean, one of the things I've been thinking about is, in the future, you're aware of the concept like everybody writes that Anne Hanley talks about. She's got that book.
Mm-hmm.
I know that made a lot of sense and still makes a lot of sense for many organizations. But now I'm thinking about it like everybody's an influencer. Like everybody has a public presence somewhere, somehow. Maybe it's just their LinkedIn profile and they post every once in a while. But I've been thinking a lot about that going forward for who we hire, because I'd love to have a team of 25 people who are all contributing in some way to the public, to the brand and the public visibility for the agency.
Yeah, I do believe everyone has an influence, but not everyone wants to be an influencer too. That's sometimes the challenge. But like, if you have that in the very beginning, like when you're interviewing someone, or you're not just going to say, hey, do you want to be an influencer? Like, they're probably already doing some of that stuff, and you can kind of determine that. And
if they have a track record of it, if they've been doing it for a while, that's a plus. And then you can support that within the agency. People like that, especially if they're really good, they're not going to stay around forever, but you get to benefit for years, however long they do stay around, from basically the profile that they have. I mean, the team that we have at Fire and Spark is like A+. So, we've been hiring for other things, and it turns out that we've been able to build an absolutely amazing team. Everybody is the right person in the right seat, and it takes a really long time to get there. I've been running this agency for 15 years, but if I was starting out with just me and a dog, I would really be thinking about who I could hire that already has a track record of influence.
Yeah. Well, I love it, man. And Dale, thanks so much for sharing your strategy about, getting on stage and going to these conferences and generating business. Because there's a lot of agency owners listening that they really kind of struggle with kind of generating business outside of referrals. And when you can get on stage, that really starts separating you from everyone else, because other people are like, they think everyone else vetted you first, which they did. It's just another strategy that works. And thanks you so much for coming on and sharing it with us.
Well, thank you. Like, the way I've always thought about it is I enjoy doing it. That's why I do it. So I have friends who run agencies that don't enjoy speaking. So the question for them is, well, what do you enjoy? Like, Is it writing? Is it the podcast? Or there's so many different things you can do for business development, attending the right conferences or doing the right type of networking. So I think it really comes down to, what do you enjoy enough that you could do it consistently and sustain it? And for me, it happens to be speaking.
Awesome. Well, I love it. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Dale. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, I've created some really cool resources for you, resources that are totally free. If you go to swank.it, We have some cool resources out there to show you how to generate more leads and better clients, as well as convert them faster and build a team where they're closing the deal, not you, which is always nice. So make sure you go to Swank It. And until next time, have a swank day. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you want more content like this, make sure you click on the link on the screen or check out your most popular podcast platform where the full episode is there. And until next time, have a swank day. What are you doing? Go check it out. Click on the link. I'll see you soon.